Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And a quick reminder, if you find these videos helpful, you like them, you share them with your friends, remember to subscribe to the channel. That just helps drive more traffic so that I know these are worth doing. I wanted to do a quick video today on those of you that find yourselves in a period of only being able to walk your horse. And most of you received this news after an injury or some kind of situation where the horse has been confined for a period of time, or they're just in a vet prescribed, very controlled exercise regime. So here's the deal. And this can be very, very stressful. What I'm going to cover in this quick video is how to most effectively navigate the process, how to get the most out of it, keep you and your horse sane, and also on the path to rebuilding. And then some things to think about for your own individual case, because as we all know, horses are so unique and individual, and that's kind of what makes this tricky. Number one is there are very few injuries in the horse world that do require the horse to be completely immobilized. But like many things in the horse world, ages ago, we did immobilize them for, a lot of things that came up. And the more we learn about how soft tissue recovers and bone remodels and the need for just movement patterns, the more we're understanding kind of on a parallel track with human medicines and therapies that a little bit of appropriate movement is actually really beneficial. So the first thing is if you've been handed down even if it's coming from a vet, the advice to lock your horse up in a stall for 2 weeks or more, I would encourage you to really get very, very clear on that, to push back a little bit. Many of us do err on the side of caution, and take a conservative approach. And a lot of vets don't know you and your own horse's routines and what you have available to you. So you may have received this information, put them on stall rest because maybe the vet thinks otherwise you'd be out galloping up in the hills. I don't know. But the first thing is, most horses, like I say, unless it's quite a catastrophic injury, can and should after about 48 hours, begin some sort of controlled walking. And if we do this right, there's no concern that you're going to like re-injure the area of concern. There is concern that your horse could go a little bit bonkers. And I think that could be mitigated with how we approach things. So the first, the first thing that I tell people is, walking can be extremely purposeful. It could also be like this very lackadaisical, unengaging, both physically and mentally experience for the horse. And when they're only allowed to come out of their prescribed confinement for 20 minutes per day, in the early goings, post injury, if we don't navigate this process in the right way, they can become kind of a management issue. So to avoid that, I want to just, again, give you some questions to ask your team of providers. Number one is, in many cases, the prescribed walking could be done under saddle versus in hand. Now, this depends on if obviously if the horse is not a super young horse, if it is trained to ride, and also if it has a lightweight rider. That's really important, especially in the case of lower limb injuries, those tendons and ligaments, fetlocks, suspensories, hoof problems, those sorts of situations. But if you have a very lightweight rider that can maybe ride the horse for this period of walking, sometimes that's more purposeful. It depends on your own individual horse. Secondly, if and when the horse is only cleared to walk for 20 or 30 minutes a day, do your best to break that up into a few short outings. There's the temptation to sort of get it all done at once, thinking more is better. But in these periods where we're trying to retrain tissue that sustained some kind of a trauma, followed by inflammation, followed by being immobilized, the frequency of stimulation rather than a prolonged duration is actually usually more helpful. But also from a mental standpoint, it's more times that your horse is able to get out, feel different surfaces underfoot, interact and smell the world around him or her. So even periods of like 3 to 5 minutes, if you can sprinkle those throughout a day, they do add up. They are beneficial. If you yourself have ever been through some sort of a physical therapy program, you understand that yourself. It can seem like compared to full training that those little dosages don't matter or don't mean anything. And it's certainly not the case. They go a long way to keeping the horse mentally settled as well as starting to retrain the body. Also with walking, as I mentioned, there's so many ways to do it. Some of you love to tie on you're like me, you like to tie on your hiking shoes and hike the horse out in the great wide open, get your own exercise at the same time. That's a great way to go about it. I also encourage people, like I show in this photo, if the horse is amenable to being ponied, I know sometimes this is more popular in the Western disciplines versus the English. It is worth training all horses to do this because it is a great social way to exercise the horses, especially if you've got a steady eddy that you can pony the other horse from. This is a great way to get the horse's walk requirements met. It's very purposeful because generally the horse strides out with a little bit more enthusiasm than the death march that sometimes happens when people are just leading the horse around the arena. It's a way for horses to be together. They are social animals, and this helps them. It helps them mitigate some of the stress that can build up when horses are in those periods of confinement. And lastly, I'll just mention ground driving. Again, I grew up in a driving family, so ground driving was something we did with all the horses. I don't see it practiced as much in modern times. But if it's something that you've wanted to learn, again, I think most horses should learn how to ground drive. Again, it's just a different way to navigate a period of prescribed walking and make it very purposeful. So it's not just out there shuffling, making clouds of dust. Moving along, sort of on this topic of uh, gear, if you will, because I mentioned ground driving. My favorite for working with horses in hand, even if that's just these walking outings, is a lunge cavesson. I won't go into it a lot right now because I'm trying to keep this video short, but I do have a free article on my blog. I've put the link here, jackballou.com/training tips. I explain why a lunge cavesson, as you see in this photo, is so valuable for working with horses in hand, namely because you can really help them organize their body and their posture. And what I mean by organize is uh, bring some balance and some quality of movement as you're working with them on the ground in hand. It is not restrictive. It should not be used in a restrictive way. It allows you to communicate with the horse without a bit. It allows you to help, again, like I say, activate the horse's top line and get good purposeful exercise as we rebuild the horse. Secondly, I'll just mention footing really quickly. Again, depending on your horse's injury, be clear with the vet to ask them what footing they should be on. For most horses coming out of a period of layup, unless they have like a navicular situation or something of that nature, there's a prescription to walk them on hard ground. That might be a little bit counterintuitive because many of us were raised to understand that hard ground is not real friendly to horses' joints. And certainly you do not want to be careening around at speed on hard ground. But firm footing like a paved driveway or a packed play area or something of that nature, the decomposed granite area. It is wonderful for rebuilding the horse's proprioception. It also allows a quick turnover of the horse's foot. So in the cases where, let's say, an extensor tendon has been strained or a suspensory ligament, we don't want the hoof sinking down into deep footing for the initial couple of weeks, because that does add a little bit of extra strain to those soft tissues. So if we can put the horse on a hard surface and increase proprioception while allowing for a nice, easy, quick turnover of the foot, that's generally the best way to go. But again, this is just something to ask your vet. Sometimes they don't always advise one way or the other. And so that's something to get clear about. Now, some of you are overachievers, and some of you during this period of walking, I get it. Sometimes it can be a bit boring. But some of you will ask, well, my horse was a high level dressage horse. So maybe during this period, could I do some lateral work? Can I do some, shoulder in and haunches in from the ground if you yourself have skills with that? Or what about hills? I've heard that hills are really beneficial. Or what about ground pulls? And generally, for the first 2 to 3 weeks, again, it really, really depends what the horse's injury was and also what they're used to. So if you have an endurance horse whose comfort zone basically is being out in the great wide open, they may find it fairly stressful to be walking in small ovals around your arena or just up and down your driveway ad nauseum. And you might want to, for the sake of their mental health, take them for a hike in the hill for one day in the early couple of weeks of rehab. But generally speaking, it's kind of good to get 2 to 3 weeks into your controlled walking program and see how things are going. Lateral work, I generally, even if your horse knows it and they're really good at it, I generally advise people to just kind of wait until the horse is in a slightly more active routine. The reason being is that there is a fair bit of body control and neuromuscular coordination that goes into performing lateral work really well. And what you're trying to do during this early walking phase is simply deliver simple, rhythmic, uncomplicated movement that improves the horse's circulation and allows the tissue to heal. So keep it as simple as possible. Poles can be useful, ground poles. Again, whether or not you raise them or leave them on the ground depends on what kind of injury your horse had. So raised poles are going to increase the flexion of the lower joints, the fetlocks, the inside the hoof capsule. And if you've had lower limb injuries, you want to keep the poles on the ground and use them very sparingly. Same goes for colic surgery until you have cleared the 6-week checkup. After that point, poles can become very, very useful. So again, getting more clarity from your vet and your team on how and if you're even going to use these things. Now, I'm just going to offer you right here as we wrap up. Here is a sample week from a program I created for, I do custom fitness plans. If you're interested in those, they're available on my website, jackballou.com. But this was one I wrote for a horse that was rehabilitating from a sacroiliac strain. And this horse did rebuild wonderfully, and they've resumed full active trail riding status. So that's great. But just to give you a sense of a little bit of variety, so we're not doing the same thing every day. These exercise numbers are from my book, 55 Corrective Exercises for Horses. Again, available on my website. But you can see the dosages here. We've got double sessions happening on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you're walking the horse twice during the day. And then we're sprinkling in some corrective exercises to help the horse start to recruit their postural muscles and just improve muscle activation so that the rebuilding phase can be really seamless and progressive without getting stuck and failing for the horse to reach or regain its performance level. So I just want to share this with you to give you, maybe some guidance on how to craft your own little program. But like I say, I'm available for help if you want to reach out with that. There is so much you can do with walking. I know it can seem kind of frustrating. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with is horses' bodies like to heal. Okay. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. The body does like to heal itself. So even though these situations can be challenging for riders and horses, take heart in the fact that nature is a pretty good designer, and the body does like to heal itself. So if we can give appropriate dosages of walk and then building into the other gaits, it can be a pretty straightforward rebuilding phase. The thing is that I'm going to leave you with is once you get through the period of controlled walking and the vet clears you to begin more activity, that's when you do need to start strategically adding more load to the body. And I know that seems simple, but sometimes there's a worry that we don't want to re-break the horse, and we keep things very, very easy out of our own concern and worry. And as with any conditioning, if we keep the stimulus too easy for too long, we fail to really rebuild the horse's body, and it likely will break again. So you do, once you clear that hurdle of the quote unquote rehab phase, you really do want to start to push the horse a little bit. And again, working with the team around you so that you add the type of fitness that is protective for the long term. So don't get caught in that easy cycle for too long. I'm going to leave you with that. If you want more info, pop over to my website, jackballou.com. If you like these videos, share them with your friend and hit the like button, subscribe, and we will catch you in a future video.